Ah, finally. Time to close the Sound Wars Trilogy. This time we're comparing the Dekoni Blues against the Mod House Argon MKIIIs. Mod versus mod, which takes the crown? So as you've seen thus far, I am not a fan of the Blues. They're good for some things, but they're really lacking in certain areas. Since these are my first impressions of the Fostex T50RP lineup, I've been sorely disappointed thus far. However, now we've got the well-revered Argons with us here for review and comparison's sake against the Blues. Same headphone, two different mods. Let's find out which takes the crown. So let's start off with the build quality and comfort here. They are somewhat different physically, though most changes refer to the functionality rather than the looks. The mod adds a cloth layer of suspension strap to the headband, replacing the stock pads with the ZMF pads, and swapping the cable connector with a protruding port rather than the hidden ones on the Blues. Big change too, you'll notice that the Argons are significantly heavier than the Blues. Like me, if you're used to carrying the Blues around, then go to pick up the Argons as the newer headphone, so to speak. It'll mess with your brain a little. You'll say, whoa, what the heck? I mean, it's not like they're, crushingly heavy, but you will notice the difference, I guarantee it. Now, in case it doesn't pick up on camera, these pads are significantly thicker than the Dekoni pads. I don't necessarily mean that in a good or bad way, I just mean different. I will say that each pad works pretty well with the respective headphones' weights. Though I should point out that the Blues don't really sit well on my head. They leave plenty of gaps, which doesn't form a good seal. They're about equally as cumbersome in terms of comfort, though the suspension strap on the Argons eliminates that hotspot issue I get with the Blues. Aesthetically, other than the functional improvements, the only thing you'll see that will tell you that they're Argons rather than stock T50RPs is the Mod House emblem located where the L and R were originally at. Now let's talk about the amplification. The one advantage here is that you are able to run the Argons single-ended or balanced depending on your amplifier of choice. On the THX AAA 789 on single-ended, I ran the Blues at 230 on gain 1, 230 on gain 1, 1 o'clock on gain 2, and 10 o'clock on gain 3. Now I ran the Argons at 3 o'clock on gain 1, 1 to 130 on gain 2, and 10 to 1030 on gain 3. And for what it's worth, through balanced, I ran the Argons at 12 on gain 1, 10 on gain 2, and 8 to 830 on gain 3. What does this tell us? The Argons aren't necessarily that much harder to drive than the stock T50RPs. They just require a little extra bit of juice because of that extra distance from your ears created by the ZMF pads. And now let's talk about the sound here. Once again, the following impressions were taken without the use of any EQ. That will be discussed in the notes and observations portion of this review. Now let's begin. So let's start off with bass here. The Argons have a more linear sub-bass extension. That isn't to say they're neutral, don't get me wrong. However, there is a difference. The Blues, while still possessing quite the powerful bass response, experience a bit of that roll-off effect as bass notes descend. A good example of what I mean, Elements by Lindsey Sterling. The Blues tend to emphasize the beat of the track, but make the rest of the low end sound somewhat closer to neutral, or just lacking in that extreme forwardness just because it is less linear. The Argons, however, they bring the entire low end forward. Like, they really fill that empty space within it. Electronic bass notes just sound meatier and fuller on the Argons than on the Blues. Again, they both have brain-rattling bass responses, okay? Bass guitars are warmer and more forward on the Argons, but they're slightly more detailed on the Blues, despite being more distant by comparison. Overall, the Argons seem to teeter the line between being the bass gods and stepping it back just a bit better than the Blues. They just know when to bring the party and when to keep it modest. And for you, that one person that commented that if you mute my videos it looks like I'm shaking maracas with headphones, you're welcome. Mids. As far as female vocals are concerned, the Argons definitely take the cake here. While they're equally forward, they have more body and present a little less sibilance too. Same thing applies with the entire range of instruments in the mid-range, really. So I'll give you an example here. Tank by the Seatbelts. The Argon's presentation is on an entirely different level than the Blues. While the Blues make instruments sound thinner and congested, the Argons make them sound fuller and give them somewhat of a concert sound, concert hall kind of feeling. Every instrument just sounds more grand and energetic, like just part of a whole, as opposed to just individuals. Like the saxophone solo too. It goes from being shrill and thinner on the blues to being forward and energetic on the Argons. Now let's get into the treble. Well, I'll start off by saying that both can get a little sibilant in the consonant region. However, the Argons present less of it than the blues do. The Argons are also a little extra airy, as evidenced by Thunder Horse by Deathclock. And for those of you who didn't watch some of my previous reviews, there's a piece of upper percussion in this track that sounds a lot like two coins rubbing up against each other. The Argons bring that noticeably forward, while the blues just barely do so. It's just barely there. Now, other than that sibilance region, the blues are just generally really cold and sharp compared to the Argons' warmer but still occasionally cold treble response. You can definitely tell that Modhouse did what they could to bring that down a bit without disfiguring them. Now, a bit of an upside to the T50RP's intrinsic sibilance is that both treble responses do have a forward and detailed attribute to them, so silver lining to a silver sound, I suppose. Soundstage and imaging. As much as I hate to admit it, the ZMF pads do improve the headphone's overall soundstage quite a bit. The Argons are in fact wider than the blues, but they're still not wide, generally speaking. They're still not a wide headphone, but just wider by comparison. However, it is that little extra width that allows the Argons to create that aforementioned grand concert hall type of presentation. I should point out, you won't always get that type of sound. It really depends on the track you're listening to, obviously. But it's totally clear that even at its worst, you will gain that increase in width with the Argons. So I've mentioned in both of the individual reviews that one particular area that they shine in is imaging. I was legitimately surprised at how great these are at tracking, both of them. Now, I can't really say that one headphone is far better than the other at imaging, but I can say that the added width of the Argons, the pads, allow the sound you're listening to breathe and distance themselves from each other a little better. Now let's approach the notes and observations portion. So here's what I conjured up for the blues. The purpose here is simple. Turn down those lows and highs, while raising up those mids and bringing them out of the murky shallows. Unfortunately, it fails to eliminate some of those pesky, peaky highs. It's unfortunate, but, ease what it is. Now these are the EQ settings for the Argons. Nothing's changed from what I showed in the individual review here. As I mentioned in that video, this just tames the bass to less murder levels, elevates the mids to flourish a little better, and tames that little peak near the treble area. Thankfully, this does manage to eliminate a very large majority of those issues and helps improve that sound signature quite a bit. It's more successful at doing so than the EQ settings for the blues, that's for sure. And it sort of goes to show that whatever Modhouse did, as opposed to what Dekoni did make the sound on these a little closer to being like a smooth response as opposed to a jagged one. Also, I should mention this one quick little tidbit here. With the Dekoni Blues, you are stuck with a single-ended cable, nothing more, nothing less. You can swap it out, yes, but you're stuck with single-ended nevertheless. With the Argons, though, you have a choice. You can go with single-ended, or you can go with balanced. You can buy whatever you prefer, depending on the amplifier that you choose, and believe me, go with the extra power. It is highly beneficial for these types of headphones. Trust me. So now let's conclude this. And yeah, this was a pretty short video. Not gonna lie there. Well, you all already know I'm not a fan of either of these two. But if I had to pick a winner, it's undoubtedly the Argons. Undoubtedly. So what do you get when you send in your stock T50RPs or even your Dekoni Blues to Modhouse? Well, you get a sound signature that isn't total garbage, added comfort, and thicker pads if you're into that sort of thing. You also get the ability to run these off of a balanced connection, like I just mentioned. Throw in a little EQ in there and you've got a pretty pleasant, warm, closed back experience. Is it worth $350? Only if what I just mentioned is exactly what you're looking for. Other than that, I'd just skip both of these, if I'm being totally honest. Well, that's gonna do it for me. Once again, shout out to Igor. Without him, I wouldn't have these Argons in for review. Like, comment, subscribe, you know the deal, you know what to do. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really hoped it helped your purchasing decision, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, ciao.